The endurance trial was scheduled for the 4th week of training. By now, every student in the academy had heard about the human who fought with his eyes closed. Some aliens thought it was an interesting trick. Others believed humans might have hidden abilities that had not been discovered before. Chief Trainer Morduk was a massive creature, whose species could hibernate for months when food was scarce. His thick fur kept him warm in any climate, and his slow metabolism meant he needed very little energy to survive. He had designed the endurance course to break even the strongest warriors. This test will separate the worthy from the weak. He announced. His voice was deep and slow, like distant thunder. You will carry heavy equipment across varied terrain for exactly 24 hours without stopping. The course was brutal. It started in desert conditions hot enough to cook an egg on the ground. Then it moved through Arctic zones where the cold could freeze exposed skin in minutes. After that came mountain climbing over peaks that reached into thin air. Finally, swamp navigation through mud that could swallow a careless student. Medical stations are positioned every 5 kilometers. Morduk continued. If you collapse or become injured, signal for help immediately. Some students die on this course every year. The alien students prepared according to their species' abilities. The Vorthak could shut down unnecessary body functions to conserve energy. The Solari shared mental strength between team members to help each other keep going. The Glacier Nans looked forward to the cold sections where their natural adaptations would give them huge advantages. Du Hyun looked at the heavy pack he would have to carry. It weighed almost as much as he did and was filled with survival equipment, water rations, and emergency medical supplies. Haiwan tested the straps and buckles, trying to find the most comfortable way to wear such a burden. Humans have poor temperature regulation and inefficient biology, Morduk said, looking directly at the human students. Your species has never completed this course. Many collapse from heat stroke in the desert. Others freeze to death in the Arctic zones. As the starting time approached, Taimin did something that had become his trademark. He sat down, closed his eyes, and meditated for 30 minutes. The other students were stretching, warming up, and making final preparations. But Taimin was completely still. Haiwan came over to him looking worried. Taimin, you cannot run this entire course with your eyes closed, she said. You will fall off a cliff or walk into a frozen lake. But Taimin had been thinking about this challenge differently than the others. While alien species had obvious physical advantages for short bursts of activity, humans had evolved for something completely different. They were built for persistence, for keeping going. Long after other creatures had given up, the starting signal sounded like a roar that echoed across the academy grounds. Immediately, the alien students burst forward, using their natural abilities to build early leads. The Vorthak sprinted ahead with powerful strides. The Nixtari took to the air, avoiding ground obstacles entirely. The Glacier Nans moved steadily, knowing their time would come in the cold sections. And Taimin closed his eyes and began to run. His human friends called out in alarm, but he was already moving. His pace was different from all the other students. Instead of racing as fast as possible, he found a steady rhythm that felt comfortable. His breathing, heart rate, and stride length all synchronized into perfect efficiency. The desert section was designed to overheat and exhaust the students. The sun was artificial, but burned just as hot as a real star. The sand reflected the heat upward, making the air shimmer like liquid. Alien students began shedding equipment to stay cool. But Taimin, with his eyes closed, found the optimal path, his feet automatically choosing the firmest ground, his body angling to catch any small breeze. His human ancestors had been persistence hunters who chased prey animals across African savannas in the hottest parts of the day. They had evolved the most efficient cooling system of any large animal on Earth. While other species struggled with overheating, Taimin maintained his steady pace. His body temperature regulated itself perfectly. He sweated just enough to cool down, but not enough to become dangerously dehydrated. His running form was so efficient that he used minimal energy. By the time he reached the Arctic section, several alien students had already collapsed at medical stations. The Vorthak, who had started so strongly, were struggling as their crystal armor conducted the cold directly into their bodies. The Solari found their mental connections disrupted by the extreme temperature, but Taimin ran through the snow and ice with his eyes still closed. His human body adapted quickly. His metabolism increased to generate more heat. His blood flow adjusted to keep his core warm. His feet found secure footing on the slippery surfaces without conscious thought. The mountain climbing section was where many students expected the humans to fail completely. The peaks were steep and the air was thin enough to make breathing difficult. Alien students with natural climbing abilities like the spider-like creatures pulled ahead while others struggled with the vertical terrain. Taemin approached the mountains, still running at the same steady pace, still breathing at the same even rhythm. When the path became too steep to run, he switched to climbing, but his pace never changed. His hands found the best holds. His feet placed themselves perfectly. His body moved up the rock face like he had been born to climb. At the halfway point, the course monitors announced the current standings. Veltar was in first place, but his crystal armor showed stress fractures from the temperature changes. Several Solari were grouped together, sharing mental energy to keep each other going. The Nixtari were struggling in the thin mountain air. Taemin was in fifth place and moving up steadily. The swamp section was the final challenge. Thick mud that could trap unwary. Students water deep enough to drown in and obstacles hidden below the murky surface. Many students had to slow down dramatically to avoid getting stuck or lost. But Taemin moved through the swamp like he belonged there. His feet tested each step. Before committing his weight, he found solid paths that others missed. His balance was perfect even when crossing fallen logs or jumping between solid patches. By hour 20, the leaders were beginning to show serious fatigue. Veltar was still in first place, but his movements had become jerky and uncoordinated. His armor was badly cracked and some pieces had fallen off entirely. Several other front runners had stopped at medical stations, unable to continue. Taemin had moved into third place. His pace had not changed since the beginning. His breathing was still steady, his stride still smooth. He looked like he could run for another day without stopping. In the final stretch as the course circled back toward the academy, Veltar suddenly stumbled. His crystal armor finally failed completely, and he collapsed beside the path. Medical teams rushed to help him while he roared in frustration. Taemin ran past the fallen warrior with his eyes still closed. His pace unchanged from hour 1. He crossed the finish line with perfect form, looking like he had just begun running instead of finishing a 24-hour endurance test. The medical team immediately began checking his vital signs, expecting to find signs of severe exhaustion, dehydration, or other stress indicators. Instead, they found a human in better physical condition than when he had started. The test had actually improved his health markers. Chief Trainer Morduke stared at the results in disbelief. "How is this possible?" he asked slowly. "Your species should not be able to maintain that pace for 24 hours. Taemin opened his eyes for the first time since the race began and smiled at the huge trainer. "I did not try to go fast," he said. "I just listened to what my body needed and gave it to it." Their students began finishing the course over the next several hours. Many were carried to medical stations on stretchers. Others needed emergency treatment for various injuries. The alien students who did finish looked exhausted and traumatized, but Taemin was already walking around helping other students and asking if anyone needed assistance. He showed no signs of fatigue and seemed ready to run another 24 hours if necessary. Do-hyun finished in the bottom third of the class, but he had completed the course, which was better than many had expected. Haiwan also finished, though she needed help walking the last few kilometers. Both humans stared at Taemin with amazement. "How can you still have energy left?" Do-hyun asked. "You just ran for a full day without stopping." Taemin stretched his arms and looked around at the exhausted alien students. "Humans were built for this," he said. "Our ancestors used to chase animals until the animals died from exhaustion. We are the best endurance runners in the known galaxy. We just forgot how good we are." The word spread quickly through the Academy communication networks. Earth cadets were no longer considered weak or inferior. Something about their biology made them capable of incredible feats when properly applied. As Taemin walked back to his room surrounded by curious alien students, he reflected on how much had changed since his arrival. A few weeks ago, everyone thought humans were the weakest species in the Academy. Now they were beginning to realize that strength came in many different forms. The final major trial tested leadership under extreme pressure. Each cadet commanded a mixed species squad, through a complex military scenario involving rescue operations, resource management, and tactical combat. The simulation was designed to favor species with natural authority presence or telepathic coordination abilities. Leadership requires commanding respect, stated Admiral Vorthes, whose species communicated through dominant pheromone releases. Humans lack any natural authority markers. Their small stature and weak presence make them unsuitable for command roles. The scenario placed each cadet in charge of a squad trapped behind enemy lines with wounded allies, limited supplies, and multiple objectives. Previous human attempts had failed because the alien squad members refused to follow orders from what they perceived as an inferior species. When Tae-min entered the simulation, his virtual squad greeted him with obvious disdain. The Vorthak sergeant growled threats. The Solari medic ignored his presence. The Nixtari scouts chattered among themselves in their own language. Once again, Tae-min closed his eyes. But this time, something different happened. Instead of issuing orders, he listened. He heard the fear in the Vorthak sergeant's voice beneath the aggression. He detected the exhaustion in the Solari medic's telepathic emanations. He sensed the confusion in the Nixtari scouts' chatter. With his eyes closed, Tae-min could perceive what his squad members needed better than they could themselves. The sergeant needed to feel respected for his combat experience. The medic needed acknowledgement of her life-saving skills. The scouts needed clear purpose for their specialized abilities. Sergeant Velkar, Tae-min said quietly, never opening his eyes. Your experience with urban combat is exactly what we need. What's your assessment of our tactical situation? The virtual Vorthak, surprised to be asked rather than ordered, began explaining the enemy positions. As he talked, Tae-min listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated deep understanding of military principles. Medic Silara, Tae-min continued, our wounded need your expertise. What supplies do you require for stable transport? The Solari medic, unused to having her medical knowledge genuinely valued, began to engage seriously with the mission planning. One by one, Tae-min brought each squad member into the planning process, never opening his eyes but somehow seeing each individual's strengths more clearly than they saw themselves. He didn't command through authority, but through understanding. He didn't lead by dominating but by listening. The mission that followed was flawless. Each squad member performed beyond their normal capabilities because they felt truly valued and understood. The rescue succeeded with 0 casualties. All objectives completed and resources managed with perfect efficiency. When the simulation ended, the virtual squad members actually saluted Tae-min, something that had never happened with a human cadet before. Admiral Vorthes stared at the results, in bewilderment. The human achieved perfect scores in all leadership metrics. How did he command respect without any natural authority presence? Maybe, suggested another instructor quietly. Authority isn't about dominance. Maybe it's about understanding. Graduation day arrived with unprecedented ceremony. For the first time in Academy history, a human had not only survived all trials, but excelled beyond every expectation. Tae-min stood before the assembled alien dignitaries, military leaders, and fellow cadets, his eyes finally open. Supreme Commander Zalkorian, the highest-ranking military officer in the Galactic Union, addressed the gathering. We have witnessed something unprecedented. A species we deemed weakest has produced our strongest cadet. We must understand how this is possible. The alien spectators leaned forward, eager to hear the secret of human capability that had been hidden from them. Tae-min stepped forward, his voice calm and clear. Honored commanders, you evaluated humans by the wrong criteria. You looked for single overwhelming advantages like strength, telepathy, or armor. But humans evolved differently. He gestured to his fellow human graduates, including Hye-won and Do-hyun, who had also passed after learning to follow his example. We are not the strongest, fastest, or most mentally powerful, but we are the most adaptable. Our advantage is not in any single ability, but in our capacity to integrate all abilities into perfect harmony. When I closed my eyes during the trials, I wasn't handicapping myself. I was accessing abilities your species have forgotten or never developed. Humans learned to hunt by persistence, to navigate by subtle environmental cues, to fight by reading micro-movements, to lead by understanding emotional needs. Supreme Commander Zalcorian's mantis-like head tilted in curiosity. But surely, these are inferior to our specialized advantages? Taemin smiled. In single-purpose situations, yes. But war is never single-purpose. It requires adaptation, persistence, creativity, and the ability to find solutions when your primary advantages fail. These are human specialties. He turned to face his former tormentor Veltar, who now looked at him with grudging respect. You called us overrated, but you never understood what you were rating. We were never trying to be the strongest or fastest. We were trying to be complete. The ceremony concluded with Taemin receiving the highest honors in Academy history. As he accepted his commission, he kept his eyes open, but his enhanced awareness remained. He could still hear the heartbeats of everyone in the room, still feel the subtle air currents, still sense the emotional undercurrents of the crowd. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from having overwhelming advantages, but from having the wisdom to use every small advantage in perfect harmony. And sometimes, the species everyone underestimates turns out to be the most dangerous opponent of all. As the ceremony ended and the various species began to disperse, many alien commanders approached human military representatives with new interest. The word spread quickly through galactic military channels. Earth cadets were no longer considered overrated. They were considered terrifying. 3 days after the navigation test, the Academy buzzed with talk about the human who had walked through the maze with his eyes closed. Some alien students thought it was just luck. Others believed Taemin had somehow cheated. But everyone was curious about what would happen during the combat trials. The combat simulation room was the most advanced training facility in the galaxy. It could create any environment and any enemy using technology that made everything feel completely real. Students would fight virtual opponents that could actually hurt them if they made mistakes. Instructor Colven was a creature that looked like a giant praying mantis. His arms were sharp enough to cut through metal. His movements were so fast that most beings could barely see them. He had trained warriors from dozens of species and had never been impressed by any human combat success. Depends on physical superiority, he announced to the gathered students. His voice was like the sound of knives scraping. Together, speed, strength, and natural weapons are what matter in real fighting. He turned his insect head toward the small group of human students. Humans have none of these advantages, he continued. Your species is slow-weak and has no natural weapons. Most humans last less than 30 seconds in basic combat scenarios. The alien students made various sounds of agreement. The Vorthak flexed their crystal armor. The Solari practiced moving objects with their minds. The Nixtari spread their wings and showed their sharp claws. Each student will face 3 rounds of combat simulation, Colvin explained. The first round tests basic fighting skills. The second round increases difficulty. The third round is designed to match instructor-level opponents. Du Hyun looked terrified. He had trained in basic human martial arts, but nothing that could compare to alien natural abilities. Hee-Won tried to look confident, but her hands were shaking slightly. The first student to enter the combat pod was Veltar. The massive Vorthak warrior stepped into the cylindrical chamber with complete confidence. The pod sealed around him, and screens showed everyone what was happening inside. The simulation created a rocky canyon environment with 3 predator drones, programmed to hunt and kill. Veltar did not even try to hide. He stood in the open and let the drones attack him. When they struck his crystal armor, they broke apart like toys hitting a stone wall. Within seconds, all 3 drones were destroyed. Second round put Veltar against 5 advanced drones with better weapons and smarter tactics, but his armor was too strong and his strength too great. The drones could not hurt him and he crushed them one by one. The third round was different. It created a virtual copy of Instructor Colven himself, with all the mantis creature's speed and deadly arm blades. The fight lasted longer, but Veltar eventually won by using his superior strength to grab the virtual instructor and squeeze until the simulation ended. Perfect scores in all 3 rounds, announced Colven. This is the standard all warriors should achieve. Several other alien students took their turns. The Solari used their mind powers to predict enemy movements and control the battlefield. The Nixtari used flight and echolocation to attack from unexpected angles. Each species used their natural advantages in obvious ways. Then it was time for the humans. Du Hyun went first, and lasted exactly 23 seconds in the first round. His human reflexes were too slow and his strength too weak. Hee-won did better, lasting almost a minute, but she also failed to complete even the first challenge. Finally, Tae-min stepped into the combat pod. The alien spectators gathered around the viewing screens, expecting to see another quick human failure. Some were already making bets on how fast he would lose. The simulation began. Tae-min found himself in a dense jungle environment, facing 3 predator drones equipped with energy weapons and advanced hunting algorithms. The drones were designed to work as a team, using pack tactics to surround and destroy their target. And then, just like in the maze, Tae-min closed his eyes. The watching aliens made confused noises. How? Can he fight what he cannot see? Asked one of the Solari. This human must be insane, said a Nixtari student. Even instructor Kolven leaned forward with interest. But Tae-min had learned something during his childhood training in traditional Korean martial arts that the alien species had never experienced. True masters of combat did not fight with their eyes alone. They fought with every sense, working together, as one. With his eyes closed, the jungle became a map of sounds and smells and feelings. The drones were advanced machines, but they still made noise when they moved through the thick plants. Tae-min could hear the whirring of their motors, the displacement of air, as they flew the small clicks of their targeting systems. His human ancestors had been hunters who tracked dangerous animals through forests and grasslands. They had learned to sense predators in complete darkness, to know when something was watching them, to feel the presence of danger before they could see it. The first drone attacked from directly ahead, its energy weapon charged up with a high whining sound that told Tae-min exactly where it was and when it would fire. He moved 3 steps to his left, just as the energy beam scorched the air where he had been standing without looking. Tae-min threw his practice knife. The blade spun through the air and struck the drone in its central processor. 1 down. The second drone tried to attack from above. It thought flying would give it an advantage, but Tae-min heard the change in air pressure as it dove toward him. He rolled sideways, grabbed a fallen branch and swung it upward. The branch struck the drone and sent it crashing into a tree. 2 down. The third drone was smarter. It tried to circle around behind Tae-min and attack from his blind spot. But humans had no real blind spots when all their senses were working together. Tae-min could smell the drones. Synthetic lubricants could feel the vibrations its movements made through the ground. He spun around and struck, with perfect timing, his fist connecting with the drone's main body just as it fired its weapon. The energy beam went wide, and the drone fell to the jungle floor, broken. 3 down, round 1, complete in under 2 minutes. The second round, immediately, began 5 drones with adaptive learning programs that could change their tactics based on what happened in previous fights. They spread out and tried to attack from multiple directions at once, but Tae-min had something the drones could not adapt to fast enough. His human brain had evolved for pattern recognition and rapid learning. While other species relied on single powerful advantages, humans had developed the ultimate advantage, the ability to learn and change faster than any opponent. Drones tried the same attack patterns they had learned from fighting other species, but Tae-min was not like other species. He moved in ways they had never encountered, flowing like water around their attacks, striking at weak points they did not know they had. All 5 drones destroyed in 90 seconds. Round 3 began without pause. The simulation created a perfect copy of Instructor Kolven, complete with lightning-fast reflexes, razor-sharp arm blades, and decades of combat experience. The virtual mantis moved faster than any human should be able to track. The alien spectators pressed against the viewing screens. This was impossible. No student had ever defeated an instructor-level opponent in simulation, and certainly no human could match the speed of a combat-trained mantis, but Tae-min still kept his eyes closed. He moved like he was dancing to music only he could hear. When the virtual Kolven struck with blades that could cut through steel, Tae-min was already somewhere else. When the mantis tried to retreat and plan a new attack, Tae-min was somehow behind him. The fight looked impossible to understand. Tae-min seemed to know where every attack would come from before it happened. His movements were smooth and effortless, like he was swimming through air instead of fighting for his life. The secret was that Tae-min was not trying to match the mantis' speed. Instead, he was listening to the tiny sounds that came before each attack. The whisper of air across blade surfaces, the subtle shift of weight before a strike, the almost inaudible hum of muscles preparing to move where Kolven relied on overwhelming speed and power. Tae-min relied on perfect timing and positioning. He did not try to be faster than his opponent. He tried to be smarter. The final exchange lasted only seconds. The virtual Kolven committed to a killing strike that would have destroyed any normal opponent. But Tae-min was not there. Instead, he was exactly where he needed to be to counterattack. The simulation ended with the instructor program disabled on the ground. Tae-min opened his eyes for the first time since entering the combat pod. He was breathing normally and showed no signs of exhaustion. The viewing chamber was completely silent. Every alien student and instructor stared at the screens showing his perfect scores. Instructor Kolven clicked his mandibles together several times, a sound that meant extreme confusion in his species. "How did you defeat a simulation of me?" he asked. "You moved like you knew every attack before I made it." Tae-min stepped out of the combat pod and looked at the giant mantis. "I did know," he said simply. "When you fight with your eyes, you can only see what is happening now. When you fight with everything else, you can sense what is about to happen." The alien students began talking all at once in dozens of different languages. The sounds mixed together into a chaos of confusion and amazement. Some species had words for what they had just seen. Others had never imagined such a thing was possible. Veltar pushed through the crowd, his crystal armor still showing cracks from his own combat trial. "This is not possible," he roared. "Humans." Kang Tae-min walked down the metal ramp of the huge transport ship. His boots made soft sounds on the shiny floor of the Galactic Military Academy. Around him, alien creatures from many different worlds moved in groups. The place was so big that his human eyes could barely see the other end. The Vorthak warriors were the most scary ones. They stood almost 3 times taller than any human. Their skin looked like crystal armor that could stop any weapon. The light from the ceiling made their bodies shine like diamonds. Each Vorthak had 4 red eyes that glowed in the dark. Their hands were bigger than Tae-min's. Head next to them floated the Solari beings. They did not walk like everyone else. Instead, they moved through the air like ghosts. Their bodies were long and thin with many arms that moved like water. They did not speak with voices. Instead, they talked by putting thoughts into each other's minds. Their pale skin looked almost transparent. The Nixtari looked like giant bats with sharp teeth and wings that could cover a small room. They hung upside down from the high ceiling, making clicking sounds to talk to each other. Their ears were huge and could hear sounds from very far away. Even the smallest aliens in the academy were bigger and stronger than any human. Tae-min looked around and saw only 5 other humans in the whole place. They all looked scared and small compared to everyone else. One human girl named Ji Hee-won stood near a wall. She was trying to look brave, but Tae-min could see her hands shaking. Another human boy called Park Do-hyun was reading something on a small screen. His face was very pale. A loud voice boomed across the huge room, making everyone stop talking. A Vorthak warrior named Veltar was pointing at the human group. His voice sounded like rocks falling down a mountain. "Look everyone, the earth monkeys are here," he said with a mean laugh. "I heard that humans are so weak they cannot even lift their own bodies off the ground." All the alien creatures started making sounds. The Vorthak laughed with deep rumbling noises. The Solari made high whistling sounds. The Nixtari clicked their teeth together. Even some smaller aliens joined in, making chirping and buzzing noises. Tae-min kept walking. He did not look at Veltar or any of the other aliens who were laughing at him. His face stayed calm like still water. He had heard these kinds of words before, when he first joined the military program on Earth. The academy building was the biggest structure Tae-min had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of metal that changed colors when the light hit it differently. Screens everywhere showed information in languages from hundreds of different worlds. The air smelled clean, but strange, like it came from machines instead of trees. Robot helpers rolled around on wheels bringing bags to different rooms. Some robots looked like metal boxes with arms. Others looked almost like animals, but made of shiny parts instead of making noise. They moved very quietly. After some time, all the new students were told to gather in the main hall. The room was so big that it could hold thousands of people. The ceiling was so high that small clouds formed near the top. Lights hung down like stars, making everything bright. A creature that looked like a giant spider walked onto a raised platform. Commander Ixon had 8 long legs and eyes all around her head. She moved very fast and could look in many directions at the same time. When she talked, her voice came from speakers because her real voice was too high for most beings to hear. "Welcome to your first day at the Galactic Military Academy," she said. "All of you came here because your worlds think you are the best fighters your species can produce. Over the next 6 months, you will face tests that will push your bodies and minds to their limits." She stopped talking and looked directly at the small group of humans. "Many of you will fail these tests," she continued. "Some of you will get hurt so badly that you cannot continue. Some of you will die." The commander turned her main eyes toward the humans. "You creatures from Earth have no natural armor like the Vorthak. You cannot read minds like the Silari. You cannot fly like the Nixtari. You have no special powers at all." Timon felt every alien eye in the room looking at his group. The silence was so complete that he could hear his own heart beating. "Your species has sent students here 3 times before," she said. "Each time they all failed before the first month was over. We expect the same thing to happen again." The other human students moved closer together like they were trying to hide. Do-hyun dropped his screen and it made a loud crack when it hit the floor. Hee-won took deep breaths like she was trying not to cry. But something different happened with Tae-min. Instead of feeling scared or angry, he closed his eyes right there in front of everyone. The moment his eyes shut, everything became more clear. He could hear things he had not noticed before. The sound of air moving through big vents in the walls, the quiet humming of machines keeping the lights on, the soft clicking of robot feet walking in distant hallways. Even the very quiet sound of alien hearts beating at different speeds. When he opened his eyes again, he saw that Commander Ixon was watching him very carefully. Her spider eyes seemed curious instead of mean, like she was trying to figure out what he had just done. The commander finished her speech by telling everyone where their rooms were and what time the first test would begin. Tomorrow at dawn, they would face their first real challenge. As the crowd started to break up, Veltar walked over to where the humans were standing. His crystal armor made grinding sounds as he moved. His 4 red eyes looked down at Tae-min with hate. "I am going to enjoy watching you fail, little earth creature," he said. His voice was so deep that Tae-min could feel it in his chest. "You will probably cry and run away before the first test is even finished." Tae-min looked up at the giant warrior. His own voice was quiet but steady. "I will see you at the first trial," he said. Veltar laughed so hard that some of his crystal armor cracked slightly. "Then you will see how weak your species really is." After the big alien walked away, Hye-won came over to Tae-min. "How can you be so calm?" she asked. "Everyone here thinks we are going to fail." Tae-min looked around the huge room at all the different alien species. "Maybe they are right," he said quietly. "Maybe humans are the weakest species here." Do-hyun picked up his broken screen and stared at Tae-min. "Then why did you volunteer to come?" he asked. "Because sometimes being the weakest means you have to be the smartest," Tae-min answered. "And sometimes the things that make you look weak are actually what make you strong." That night in their shared room, the 3 human students tried to sleep, but the beds were made for much larger creatures, and the air felt different than Earth air. Do-hyun tossed and turned. Hye-won stared at the ceiling, but Tae-min closed his eyes and listened to all the sounds of the alien academy. The distant conversations in strange languages, the footsteps of night patrol guards, the humming of machines keeping everything running. Tomorrow would bring the first test and everyone expected the humans to fail quickly. But as Tae-min drifted off to sleep, he smiled slightly. He had a feeling that the aliens were about to learn something very surprising about the species they thought was so weak. The morning sun came through the big windows of the academy like golden fire. Taemin woke up before the alarm and found that he had slept better than his human friends. Do-hyun looked tired with dark circles under his eyes. Hye-won kept yawning and rubbing her face. The dining hall was enormous with tables made for every kind of alien body, tall tables for the Vorthak low flat areas, for creatures that crawled, hanging spaces for beings that preferred to eat upside down, the smell of food. From 100 different worlds mixed together in strange ways, Taemin ate simple food that was closest to what humans were used to. Some kind of grain mush and protein cubes that tasted like nothing. Do-hyun could barely eat anything because his stomach was upset from nervousness. Hye-won picked at her food while watching the alien students around them. The aliens were talking loudly about the first test. Many of them seemed excited like they were going to a fun game. The Vorthak were betting on how quickly the humans would give up. The Solari were sharing thoughts about the best strategies to use. After breakfast, all the students were taken to a huge room with walls that reached up higher than any building Taemin had ever seen. In the center was something that looked impossible to understand. The maze of echoes was like a puzzle made of moving walls that never stopped changing. Proctor Zethan was a creature that looked like she was made of rubber with long arms that could stretch in any direction. Her skin was purple and covered with spots that changed colors when she talked. She moved by flowing across the ground like thick water. "This test will show us who has real navigation skills," she announced. The maze changes its shape. Every few minutes the walls move. The floors shift, the ceiling opens and closes in different places. She pointed at the center of the maze with one of her long, stretchy arms. "Somewhere in the middle is the goal. You must reach it using only the natural abilities your species was born with. No machines, no tools, no help from others." The alien students nodded and made various sounds of understanding. The Solari whispered to each other with their minds. The Nixtari spread their wings and tested the air currents. The Vorthak flexed their muscles and checked their crystal armor. "Your species gets to use basic tools," she said, looking at the humans. "Though I do not think simple devices will help you very much." Do-hyun pulled out a small scanner that, could detect walls and openings. Hye-won had a compass and a device that could mark her path. Both tools looked very tiny and weak compared to the natural abilities of the other species. The test began with a loud horn sound that echoed through the massive room. 50 students entered the maze from different points around the edge. Immediately, the sounds of movement and effort filled the air. The Solari closed their eyes and reached out with their minds, trying to touch the thoughts of students who had passed this test before. They floated through the air, following mental trails left by previous success. The Vorthak simply smashed through walls that got in their way. Their crystal armor could break through almost anything. The maze tried to repair itself, but they were faster than the moving walls. The Nixtari used their incredible hearing to make sound maps of the whole maze. They sent out clicking noises and listened to how the sounds bounced back. This told them exactly where every wall and opening was located. Hyun ran into the maze with his scanner beeping and flashing. But within minutes, the moving walls made his device confused. The scanner started showing walls where there were openings and openings where there were walls. Soon he was more lost than if he had no device at all. Hye-won tried to mark her path by scratching small symbols on the walls. But every time she turned around, the walls had moved to new places. Her markings were scattered around the maze in ways that made no sense. From deep inside the maze came the sound of Veltar laughing. "Where are the brave earth creatures?" he called out. "I can hear them running in circles like lost children." Then something unexpected happened. Taemin sat down right at the entrance of the maze. He folded his legs and placed his hands on his knees. Then he closed his eyes and became very still. Other students who were rushing past him stopped to stare. A few alien creatures started making confused noises. "Has the human broken?" asked one of the Nixtari. Is his mind damaged from fear? But Taemin was not broken or scared. He was doing something that none of the other species understood. He was listening with every part of his body, with his eyes closed. The maze became a completely different place. Instead of confusing walls, he heard the subtle sounds of machinery. The walls did not move silently. They made very quiet mechanical noises before they shifted. He could hear gears turning and motors humming seconds before each wall moved to a new position. The air in the maze was not the same everywhere. When passages opened, the air pressure changed slightly. Taemin could feel these tiny changes on his skin like a very gentle breeze. When a wall was about to move, it created small vibrations in the floor. His feet could feel these vibrations through his boots. Most important of all was a sound that never changed. Deep in the center of the maze was the power source that made everything work. It created a steady humming sound that was always there no matter how much the walls moved. It was like a heartbeat that never stopped. While other students were running and fighting and using their special abilities, Taemin stood up and began walking slowly into the maze. His eyes stayed closed. He moved like someone walking through his own house in the dark. Someone who knew exactly where everything was. He could hear Do-hyun calling for help from somewhere to his left. The scanner had finally broken completely and the boy was lost and frightened. He could hear Hee-won trying to climb over a wall that was taller than she could reach, but Taemin walked calmly forward. His bare human feet could feel every small change in the floor. They told him when he was walking toward the power source and when he was walking away. They could sense the vibrations that meant a wall was about to move. When he reached his first intersection, he stopped and listened. The humming was stronger. To his right, so he turned right. When the path split again, he followed the sound that was growing gradually louder. Behind him, he could hear alien students crashing into walls and arguing with each other. Some were fighting each other when they met. At the same intersection, the Vorthak were smashing everything, which made loud noises that confused the Nixtari, who needed quiet to use their sound mapping. But Taemin moved through it all like a ghost. He seemed to know exactly when each wall would move. He stepped through openings just as they appeared. He avoided dead ends without even checking them. His path was straight and sure. The other species were using their powerful abilities, but those same abilities had weaknesses. The Silari could read minds, but the maze had no mind to read. The Vorthak could break walls, but the maze just made new ones. The Nixtari could map everything, but their maps became useless when everything changed. Taemin had no special powers, but he also had no weaknesses to overcome. His human senses worked together in perfect harmony. His ears heard the mechanical sounds. His skin felt the air pressure changes. His feet detected the floor vibrations. His nose even smelled the different materials used in different parts of the maze. After what felt like a long time but was actually very quick by maze standards, Taemin reached the center. His eyes were still closed when his hand touched the goal marker. Only then did he open his eyes to find a Solari student arriving at almost the same moment. The alien creature was floating in the air with glowing eyes from using mental powers. But when the Solari saw that Taemin had been walking with closed eyes, its many arms began shaking with surprise. Proctor Zethan was watching from above through cameras placed throughout the maze. Her purple skin had turned bright orange, which meant she was experiencing strong emotions. When she announced the results, her voice was different than before. The human student reached the goal in record time, she said, and he did it without using any tools or technology. The other aliens who were still struggling in the maze stopped what they were doing to listen. He navigated the maze of echoes with his eyes closed. The entire time, Zethan continued. This should not be possible for any species. When Taemin finally emerged from the maze, Do-hyun and Hye-won were waiting for him. They had eventually found their way out, but had never reached the center. Do-hyun looked embarrassed about his broken scanner. Hye-won seemed frustrated that her marking system had failed. But both of them stared at Taemin with amazement. "How did you do that?" Hye-won asked. "You never even looked where you were going." Taemin smiled at his human friends. "I did not need to look. He said I could hear where I needed to go." Veltar emerged from the maze much later. His crystal armor was cracked in several places from smashing through too many walls. When he saw that Taemin had finished, first his 4 red eyes burned with anger. "This is impossible," he roared. "A weak human cannot navigate better than a Vorthak warrior." But the results were recorded and could not be changed. For the first time in Academy history, a human had not only passed the first test but had achieved the best score. The alien students gathered around Taemin trying to understand what had happened. Some were curious, others were suspicious. A few seemed frightened. As they walked back to their rooms, Do-hyun asked Taemin to teach him how to navigate with closed eyes. But Taemin shook his head gently. It is not something I can teach quickly. He said it is something humans have always been able to do. We just forgot how to listen.